Welcome everybody back from a long break from Brown and Browner, unfortunately, due to the holidays and personal stuff. We had to put in a little bit of hiatus, but we're back here and going live. And hey, we're gonna talk about a little bit of everything today.
Yes, let's give it to them. Good to see everybody again. Got a lot to talk about. Interesting things in society that we were just touching upon before we started our show. Let's have at it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, no. So, we had the United CEO, murder, if you will, that took place. And they've apparently apprehended the guy from yesterday at a McDonald's. And apparently it was a very easy apprehension, if you will, arrest, if you will, from what I've heard. What boggles the mind is the psychology of this person and everything else that's behind it. And frankly, it leads to a lot of questions in society of where we stand today. If you guys aren't informed already, the guy that was caught, 26-year-old male, comes from a ridiculously affluent family from the Maryland area, comes from an exquisite background in terms of academics. The guy kid was a valedictorian in high school, went to UPenn, graduated top of his class, business school, the whole 9 yards. And at some point, I guess he must have gotten injured from what we're hearing, had some spinal issues. Supposedly his provider may have been United Healthcare, may have been denied some claims, and apparently this may have triggered what happened, essentially. Leads to us a lot of questions in society in terms of, hey, vigilante justice for, the rights and wrongs of, what are considered human rights and everything else that comes with medicine and healthcare these days.
And while there are issues with the insurance industry and how they operate, we all know that they'll try their hardest to deny anything. And if you're persistent, you might get it. But I cannot get behind anyone murdering someone premeditated.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were turned down for this. They're cancer patients. There are many, probably far more serious people. I'm not saying his situation isn't serious, that have been turned down as well. And if we start going down this slippery slope, we're talking about this, people are funding his legal efforts. Mm-hmm. If he by chance got off, which I can't see how you get off on premeditated murder. I don't care how much money you have in this world. I don't care the situation. If people are going down, if we're going to go down this slippery slope, everybody might as well arm themselves and just be walking around with guns on the street. And anytime you get into an altercation, you get denied in any way. A girl doesn't want to take you to the prom. Does that mean that you get mad enough and this validates any action that you have after that?
No,
I don't think so.
No, this sets a very horrible precedent for society in every realm. Yes, I understand that healthcare is a fundamental right of most people, or that's the general belief. But at the end of the day, you don't have any right to go after something in a vicious manner just because you feel like you're entitled to it or whatever it is, regardless of your status in life, whether you're affluent, poor, hungry, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry, but we all live with the same evils in life, or similar evils, I should say. I shouldn't say the same, but similar evils in life. It doesn't give anyone the right to go claim someone else's. At the end of the day.
That's correct. We do not have the right to take someone else's life. I would be all behind anyone who says, hey, we need to come up with a plan of action against the insurance companies because this is wrong. I'm all about that because I agree that something needs to be done. But what doesn't need to be done is for every individual to take things in their own hands and decide that someone's life is something they can take from them. I don't care what you do to them. I mean, there are some, situations, the way you feel about your family. Somebody comes at your family, you might take action in that way. Other than that, I just can't see how this could ever be justified. And if we start championing these kind of causes, or championing, I can't even say the word championing, something's wrong with our society.
Yep.
And this is the problem when you have, and you mentioned it, this guy is smart, had the best education, and yet the emotion of being turned down trumped reasoning, morals, principles. I'm just going to go after this guy. And he didn't just go after this guy again in the moment. He sat and waited for this guy. He knew his routine.
Cold, calculated.
Down in the street, cold-blooded.
Yep. No.
God forbid that we start thinking that this is the right thing to do.
In kind of a, I don't know if I call it a twist or irony or whatever it is, but in the same day that you had the arrest of this gentleman for this murder, you also had a case in New York where you had a civilian trying to defend others on a subway train on trial, happened to get, luckily, you know, not guilty verdict, I think, in my opinion. Everybody's open to their opinion, obviously, on this, where he felt that others were in harm. He's a former military guy. He wanted to protect the others on the subway. That was the case. Jury of his peers found him not guilty of it, found him to be innocent of, you know, unfortunately, fatally killing the man who was causing the trouble on the subway. Obviously, there's going to be people that argue this both ways, and it's going to be a contentious thing in all forms. But again, it leads us to that question of the slippery slope in society of what do we allow and not allow. And I think that was kind of what was at the forefront of that jury, at least in my opinion, and why I kind of sided with what the jury said in that regard, meaning that let's say that this individual would have been held guilty of killing this person, which I think was inadvertent, at least based on the evidence, for stopping this, or at least he stopped this other individual from potentially harming others that were around him in a public setting. If we would have gone through that, we would have lived entire society in fear, in my opinion. We'd be living in a society of where you wouldn't want to help the person next to you if they were getting hurt, harmed, or whatever it is. So I think there was something to be said there in that respect or that regard. That said, you know, was excessive force used and that kind of thing? You know, obviously time will tell what everybody wants to tell in this story. But it's a weird irony that we had to discuss both these topics on the same day, you know, where we're talking about the limits of society and what can be done to hopefully equalize things amongst people. But at the same time, we know that a stratification exists, unfortunately, in society.
Yes, it does. And I guess, you know, on the second topic,
Yeah.
I'm one to always protect people, and I've done that before. I've helped to apprehend people, call the cops, had the cops arrest them. In one funny incident, in the parking lot where I live, and I lived in a nice neighborhood, or I still do, but where I lived before, and the guy was robbing a car, one of my neighbors. So my brother and I went down, and it just happened to be on my birthday, and we're all together, and my brother sees something on the porch. I look, we run downstairs. We catch him in the car. He tries to get out on one side. He saw my brother there. And my brother's a big dude too. Mm-hmm. And then he came out to my side. I pulled him out, put him in a full Nelson, slammed him against the car a couple of times because it was fun. And he deserved it. And he proceeded to tell lies and this and that. The funny part of the story was my wife called the cops. The cops came and he saw 3 black guys. Right. Now, granted, I got this guy in a full Nelson, so it wasn't like he was going anywhere, right? They wanted to arrest all 3 of us.
I figured.
My wife had to run downstairs and tell them, no, this is the one apprehending the guy that he has in the full Nelson. Can't you tell? So, you know, and I guess my whole thing is I'm all about trying to stop people from harming others and from doing wrong.
Yep.
What I will say is this. Could I have beat this guy silly?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. But I knew I had him and there was nothing he was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
The scary thing about emotion, anger, and the moment that you're talking about is at what point was this person subdued and no longer could pose harm to someone versus killing them? And I'll cite something like this too. Many of the things that we've seen on video with police officers and black men, where in one case in New York, the guy was selling Lucy's, which are single cigarettes out of a pack in front of some establishment, I guess, that sold cigarettes. This guy was selling Lucy's. There were like 5 to 6 officers on him. They subdued him and kept subduing him to the point where he asphyxiated and he could no longer breathe and he died.
Yep.
That's the scary thin line that we're talking about. I don't disagree with your stance and with the jury's stance because we can't live in fear. And one of the things I hate the most, especially in urban areas, I'll call it urban areas, we know what that means, is that people don't talk. People don't help. People watch things go down and they'll videotape it, but they won't do anything about it. They won't stop it from happening.
Yep.
That is wrong. I understand why people don't do that because you're putting your life in harm's way. And this particular individual didn't feel that because he was trained and so forth. However, if we continue to go down that slope of everyone doing this, at what point is it that I just think the person needs to die and I'm taking that approach on something that might just need, like what I did, put the person, subdue the person, get them arrested, they're done. So that's the part that I'm afraid of, because if everybody walks around, people are taking MMA classes and doing this and doing that now. So everybody's feeling a little Herculean and think they all buff and ready to show what they know. At what point does it become, this person was maybe a little agitated, maybe acting a little raw, but now all of a sudden he's dead, as opposed to maybe having a night in jail to sleep it off and learn a lesson.
Well,
I'm afraid of.
I go back to the central lesson of what we try to preach here is to be human. We need to get rid of the stereotypes. And that's exactly to your point. We have these stereotypes baked in our minds, urban centers, wherever it is. And automatically that triggers psychological things, as we've just alluded to here. And it causes more harm than good. As simple as that. If we can somehow work as society to get over those stereotypes and work to be people again, I think we can actually get over some of these, these hurdles and challenges that we have in society, especially like you just mentioned, the examples of excessive force, which we've seen very commonly happen in a lot of different places now, from authority and anything otherwise, essentially, particularly in a race-charged world, unfortunately. It's something that we can try to strive to be better about without having to get to the point where we have to discuss these situations that have gone over the limit. And that's the sad truth. And will we ever get there? I don't know. I really don't know. It's going to take a Herculean effort across the world to get over these different mindsets and come to be as people again, as opposed to trying to live in fear or whatever it is.
I feel like we're getting further away from
that
type of solution.
Yep.
And people today feel empowered to take things in their own hands.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, depending on your life's filter, what you've experienced in life, maybe I'm very hateful towards people like this.
Yeah.
And now, instead of trying to subdue or stop the threat, my anger and emotions from my own experiences take over. And now I'm exceeding what is necessary for that situation when it comes to force and violence. And I do think that we're seeing many more instances of that type of approach versus I'm all about it. I wish the guy would have just subdued the guy, because I don't want people to live in fear. You should be able to get on the train or the bus and not fear somebody getting in your face and doing all sorts of stuff or touching you. That should never happen. However, I don't think the people who do that deserve to die.
Exactly.
That's what I'm afraid that we're starting to see more of in today's society. There has to be some type of median, but again, I feel like everything's becoming much more polarized when we look at any of these situations. There are so many people that feel like, yes, and I'm glad he deserved that. And there are others who, maybe a little too light on it because, well, he has rights and he wasn't harming anybody. Yes, he was. No. So we just have to be able to look at what's really right. And we know what's right and wrong. I know that killing somebody is wrong. Accidentally killing someone, I sort of get, but you have some control over that. And somebody should have been trying to stop him once he got to a point where this guy had no chance of doing anything.
Well, I'll get back to the central point here.
I'm afraid as a black man, because some people might look at me as a threat just because I'm big and I'm black. So anything that I do might warrant their worst actions versus maybe some reasoning of what's going on and maybe even some conversation around it.
And then you just hit the nail on the head. Stereotype versus actual communication. If you actually communicated, you can actually solve probably a good chunk of these problems before they even come to head as a society. If people are willing to engage in dialogue, if people are willing to at least talk things out before things get escalated, things of that nature, there's ways to improve in society. I'm not saying that's the solution, obviously, but there's ways to improve, and it starts with simple communication. It's easy as that.
That's it. Plus, I think the other thing is this too. I'm not asking somebody to walk a mile in my shoes.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I want them to at least consider me as a human being.
Understand it. Yes.
Yeah, and be able to say there has to be a reason for what's going on. Let's find that out, versus me determining that whatever it is not warranted. And, maybe I'll just teach this person what's right and what's wrong myself.
Yep. Nope, I don't disagree. No, like I said, what we always like to do, at least on this particular show, is we advocate for communication. We advocate for that dialogue. We advocate for that Thinking, critical thinking.
and
Yes.
compassion and empathy and
Yes.
sympathy in cases.
Yep.
But again, I get it. Like I said, I went down there and I subdued that guy, but I didn't try to hurt him. Maybe I slammed him a couple of times just to let him know that I was serious, that
Yes.
he wasn't
And
going to get away.
I hate to say it, but at times force is necessary to
Mm-hmm.
get some points across, especially when there are. And the thing is, you treat someone in the same way, or at least I like to think that there's equal and opposite reaction, right? Like in a science way. Meaning, if you're feeling threatened by whatever it is that's in front of you, you're probably going to respond with similar or equal threat, right? Like in whatever way. So in your case, you were subduing a guy. He was obviously showing no physical restraint. So at the same time, you have to physically restrain him. It is what it is. And if you have to increase that physical restraint, it is what it is. Now, the psychology of that at some point takes over, as we know from this example that happened in New York and with the subway and all that. It happens every day, unfortunately, in different aspects. And can we get over that is the real question, whether it's police force, anything of that sort. I mean, we've seen it a million times. George Floyd being I hate to say it, the quintessential example here.
I was thinking of that when I spoke with the guy in New York selling the Lucy's.
Absolutely.
George Floyd was the extreme where force was being used by people that we give that ability to, power and authority, and they used it in the wrong way, and someone ended up dying. And then they tried to say that they were doing the right thing. That's the part
that's where there is no remorse, there is no answer, is what I like to say.
That's correct.
Yep.
That's correct. You're not remorseful in the actions that you have when you see that it's clearly wrong.
Yeah.
That's when we're in a situation that scares me the most about our society.
Yep. Absolutely. So no, to that point, we've covered two big topics that obviously happened in the last, 48 hours, if not longer, obviously over the last few days. We obviously, send sympathies and regret for all that have been affected in all that situation. But, all we can say is that there are ways to improve upon this in society. We just ask that everybody take the time to do so, and take the time to appreciate it.
And learn from these things. Don't just poo-poo them. Let's have a conversation with your friends. Is this right? Is this wrong? If you were in that situation, would you do the same? Let's talk, and maybe you'll get a better understanding so we can prevent things like this from happening in the future.
Yeah. Well, and to the point of the whole, the whole thing with the murder of the CEO, I think this will spark dialogue amongst people, for better or worse. This guy is, for better or worse, he'll probably be seen as a martyr in some respects. A martyr in the sense that it will at least start dialogue. I don't know if it's the best way to go about it. I don't think it's the best way to go about it, but you've already seen some change. I think one of the CEOs of one of the blues plans in the country came out and said, "Oh, well, we'll change our policies on anesthesia. We're not going to try to do it by the minute or something like that, or whatever it is." I kind of mind blown by something like that happening in the world where insurance is dictating how long an anesthesiologist can perform anesthesia and get billed for it critically. And again, I'll be critical given what the field that we're in. Why is insurance dictating healthcare? I always question it. The simple fact of the matter is, if we consider certain things to be unalienable human rights, healthcare, welfare, things of that nature, then why are we letting third-party entities get in the way of A and B? If we've got a care provider and you've got a patient, those guys work together, work for the best solution, right? Like, that's just how it works. Similarly, you work with your mechanic to figure out the best way to fix your car. Like, no third-party billing service is getting in your way, generally, I should say.
I was about to say, I don't know, we might not call it third-party
car insurance.
There are some things in play there that may act like that.
There's situations.
I guess the biggest thing here, what I would say is, and for better or worse, capitalism is what it is.
Right.
But when you look at the insurance companies, they are a business first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, because it isn't about finding solutions for conditions to promote the best outcomes for individuals.
Yes.
It's how can we provide the least amount of cost to address this situation?
Yes,
and if it exceeds what we think is a reasonable cost, and that there's an asterisk there, then we will determine that further action cannot be covered.
Yep.
And that is wrong. That is not how healthcare works. And I think you said it right. The professionals in the healthcare business are looking out for the individual. The insurance companies don't have that same agenda. So now you're at odds of what's the best care versus what are we willing to pay for.
I mean, not to make it personal, I had my knee surgery. I got denied for my MRI that my physician felt was needed because I had torn a ligament. Similar to my colleague
I had
here.
back issues, and my insurance company said, you know what? We know that you have ligament and other issues, nerve issues, but
Yes.
why don't we just take an x-ray? So we took an x-ray that doesn't tell you anything. Then we took an MRI after the x-ray didn't tell us anything, that it was more cost than what was necessary and delayed my surgery.
Well, I pushed the buttons on what I did. And so this is the fun math behind it, if you will. And this is what gets really comical. So I had my insurance company say, no, we're not going to cover your MRI. You need to do 6 weeks of therapy. I'm like, okay, so you want me to do 6 weeks of therapy on a torn ligament? So I was like, hey, you know what? How much are you going to reimburse the therapy center? And, what's my copay, all that good stuff. My copay was, I think, $50 for each session. I'm like, okay, fine. That'll be my copay. What are you guys reimbursing the therapy center? And they're like, oh, we're going to reimburse $250 a session. I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. You want me to do 6 weeks of therapy. So let's assume weekly therapy. So 6 times 250, right? So about $1,200, $1,300. I'll be paying my copay. Fine. So that's icing on the cake.
That's
how much is
actually?
How much? Yeah. How much is an MRI again? Oh, an MRI is going to be what we pay out for an MRI. The insurance company is roughly $430.
It's a hell of a lot less.
Yes. So the easy math there was, hey, third-party biller, you don't want to pay $430 of coverage for the MRI to get it done immediately and get to the next course of action. You want to pay out $1,500, like you just said, and have me wait through 6 weeks, only to come back to another $400 charge later.
Right back to where you started, and then
Yes.
having to do, and that's exactly what they did to me. And here's a kicker for me.
Yes.
They wanted me to go through all of this, all of the PT and such. I could barely get out of bed.
Yeah, I was going to say, exactly.
So how am I going to do the PT to do what you said? So, but again, they just have this one road that they travel. It isn't about me and my condition. It was about, here's what the 90% of the people should be doing. You
Yes,
should take
sir.
the therapy, do it for 6 weeks, and then we'll revisit to see if maybe it went away magically.
Yep. No, like I said, that's where I sat baffled. I'm like, okay, so who do I need to escalate the common sense to real quick? I was very bold with my insurance company at this point.
Good for you.
And they were like, well, you need to get your surgeon's office on the line and we can contend this through the channels that are necessary. They have to file an appeal and all that crap and give them the paperwork. I'm like, hey, great. Got my PA on the line from the office, went through it. She ripped him a new one because she's like, we got 1,000 of these approved a day. What's your problem here?
Right.
And more importantly, again, the math argument. So again, to your point, you have a third-party biller who thinks they're doing better justice financially to whatever entity they serve, right? But common sense is evading the equation. So tell me again, what purpose does an insurance company serve in that situation to where it's denying physical care for a patient that a medical provider is trying to do the right thing by and do the quickest thing by and already thinking more efficiently? So it's sad that we've gotten to that place in society. And that, that of course is part of the story here with this CEO killing, unfortunately, where I think this individual had back pain. I think he had there's a thing coming out online where he had an x-ray of himself with the spine, with the screws and plates in his back, the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that was the whole, part of his whole manifesto and everything. So clearly he was in pain, as you can tell.
And I know with back, I was
going to say, my colleague here can tell you exactly about that.
I was in pain 24 hours a day, regardless of the drugs they gave me. So,
yep. And I'm sorry, but you don't see my colleague out here going up for some vendetta.
And that's the difference.
Yes.
As bad as anything can be, as bad as someone can do you as far as decision-making, actions, whatever it may be, does that warrant the reaction that he had?
Exactly.
And that's the plain truth. And that is exactly the problem here, is that we cannot have vigilante justice rule our society. If we start acting like that, you won't want to go outside.
I mean, I'll be very trivial. That makes us nothing better than the animals that we are supposedly higher on the food chain on, And
that's exactly right. We say we are civilized. That's what distinguishes us between, the animal society, the kingdom, is that we're at the top because we can be rational. We can actually evaluate things reasonably and come up with a solution.
Yep.
That's not the solution, people. That's
Yep.
not the solution. And we are not civilized if we back that type of action. All we're starting to become is no better than the animals. And at some point,
Yep.
all of the people that you might think you're running with will also turn against you because they have the same philosophy. And all of a sudden, if we have a disagreement, maybe I'd shoot you because I think that that's the right thing to do.
Yep. Sad truth. Sad truth. Well, at this point, we've covered what were the grim topics, I think, or the challenging topics of the week. We'll now get to the fun of it, which is back to sports, unfortunately, the crux of all of this.
Hey, before we talk about the NFL in this upcoming week, it's fantasy playoff time, folks.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Everybody's in your fantasy pools. I know you're getting in. I'm fortunate to make both of my playoffs, finish second and fourth in the two leagues I'm in.
I'd like to publicly announce that our colleague here, Roy, has made the playoff despite having Christian McCaffrey having drafted in the first round. To that, you deserve an award in its own right to any of the fantasy owners out there publicly who had to go through that agony this year and the falsehood that is the PR system of the 49ers, as I like to call it,
yes.
and the farce that is the NFL injury announcement, system. Despite that, we've had many good fantasy teams luckily make it to the playoffs despite those hurdles. Now, on that same note, and transitioning into some of the results, it's funny that the 49ers now have Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, and their third string running back all gone.
He just got injured their last game. So and this begs the question.
Yes.
In my own opinion, I feel like this year more than any other that I can remember had significant injuries, not just injuries where somebody's out a week here, a week there, but significant injuries where star players have missed a significant amount of time. And it isn't just a particular position. Running back is usually one of those where you see a lot of the injuries because of the grind and such, but you're seeing it with wide receivers and linebackers and corner. You're seeing it across the board. Is there something to be said about how teams are practicing or what's going on? What is the cause of this?
So there's a good read, or a good set of reads, I should say. There's a Twitter handle I follow called Deepak Choni. He's a physician. He's an orthopedic surgeon, very noted, not nationally. He gives a lot of commentary on the NFL and actually weekly updates on all the injury bug around the NFL. And it's kind of a good follow. On top of that, what he's done over the last 2 years is kind of create a study, if you will, of practice habits, everything else that's going on in the NFL to come up with a case as to why we're seeing a greater prevalence of injuries. He chalks it up to a couple things if you look at a lot of his handles for the last couple of years. One, he thinks it's just in the way that players are training these days. He thinks that there is if you compare, say now to let's say the 1980s per se, you're seeing players train year round versus in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you probably saw players travel conditionally, right? So, as a season were to ramp up or as the season's coming into fruition. So let's say May hits and NFL season starts in September, you'll see players conditioning throughout the summer, getting ready for the season. But maybe the period between January and May, hands off. They're not doing anything. They're just kind of staying.
That's vacation time.
Exactly. Vacation. They're staying lean, whatever, and everything else, eating unhealthy. We're doing whatever they want. Now you've got professionals professionals that are being hired by each individual player, maintaining their bodies throughout the year and stuff like that. I think this week, actually, there was a good note on Derrick Henry. He hires a personal trainer and a personal physician or a personal nutritionist throughout the year. Yep. And just that budget alone for him is almost $350K a year that Derrick Henry pays out to have that 24/7 regimen around him, basically, to stay in shape, on top of the fact that he's working out and everything else. Is that causing potentially more injuries, meaning that he's having to continually work out, continually stay healthy and everything else? There is some validity to it, because what it's doing is it may not be giving the body enough time to
recover.
Exactly. Tom Brady, good example, TB12, the whole system and everything. Now, Tom Brady's kind of an anomaly because, the guy barely got injured and, in his career.
Whatever he did, people should take up because it worked for him. He played to 44?
Yeah, he played to 44. He barely got injured. Peyton Manning, similar. Eli Manning. A lot of these guys that you don't see as like the physical specimens of the league,
Yeah.
And I think
Not workout warriors either.
No, they knew how to condition themselves long run. You're seeing this in the NBA too. I mean, LeBron James, for God's sakes, you're seeing this amongst some of the exceptional athletes who I think have figured out the cycle of what's needed to make that body conditioning work. But then some of these guys that are exceptionally physical specimens, Metcalf, for instance, DK Metcalf.
He's an amazing specimen.
I mean, the man is physically beyond anything, but he gets injured a lot. If you noticed,
he does.
He gets injured a lot.
I mean, some of that is just inherent in the position. Like his last injury was that sideline pass where he got flipped over and everything. Those kind of things you can't avoid. That's football, and that's you're going to get injured in that.
Well, and that's the other part of argument that Deepak Chona makes is like the hitting has gotten harder. There's no question.
Yeah. Yep.
So there is a degree to that. At the same time, while protective gear has, had its own advancements, the hitting is harder and the people are stronger and things have changed.
Well, when you say protective gear, it's funny. I was just talking to someone about the difference between rugby and football, because football comes from rugby. Let's just be real.
Yep.
The word they used, it's a French, one of my French neighbors. He said, well, the U.S. players are a bunch of P words.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
And my reply to that was, it actually is even harder hitting with what we think is heat. And the reason he said that is
how much gear you're carrying
from getting hit. But what it also does, it allows the defender or defensive player to become a weapon in and of itself, because
bowling ball.
When you play without pads, I remember this one guy was like 230. He was like Derrick Henry size, and he's running back. I didn't want to jump in and try to tackle him, because even if I did, him falling on me was hurting me when you didn't have pads.
Yeah.
With pads on, you launch yourself at people.
Yes.
Because now you're not afraid of all of those other things.
Yep.
So I do think that with the protective padding, that it actually promotes the harder hitting. It increases the intensity of things because there isn't that fear.
I 100% agree, because if you think about it, okay, if me and you lined up against each other, obviously you'd kill me. That's one piece of the pun. But let's face facts. As we're going at each other, your body conditions itself. If you're attacking someone, you don't have protective gear. You're protecting your own body as you're attacking, right? Like there's a defense mechanism built into your brain.
Turning, try to use this, all of those things. Yeah. But now with the helmet, helmet is now, my head's a weapon, and it's come in like this because now I'm not really worried about getting hurt.
Yep. No, and so there's some validity, I think, on both sides of it. But I think, between the bigger hitting, the fact that you're seeing a little bit more brutal conditional play and stuff like that, it's probably what chalks up a lot of these injuries and everything. Now, that said, shouldn't there be better training teams, better medical like you would think with all these big budgets as teams have, you would think that those things would improve. Training facilities, conditioning things, everything else would improve, but doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, and again, I think that there's a way, and I think you hit it on the head of the way some of the players prepared themselves in the past. We have made so many advancements. Isn't there a way to optimize how you prepare and what makes more sense? Hey, you know what? You prepare and you ramp up as you go through the season to get your body ready for the duration of the season. After the season, you get a respite. That gives your body a chance to heal, and then you start ramping back up at a certain interval, not full bore. And, I wonder if that's the case, that, as you said, your body's strained and now it's more prone to be injured, as opposed to if you pull back on some of that workout regimen and let your body heal, recover, that you might be better prepared to absorb more hits and not be injured as frequently.
I mean, I joke about it too, but if you think back to like how these players in the 60s, 70s, 80s, like were in the off season. And I think a good example of that is if you go watch The Last Dance with the Bulls too. Like these guys weren't sitting there conditioning in the off season. They were out golfing, partying, stars and everything.
Jordan was a conditioning freak. And one of the things you saw in The Last Dance was how, and this is the fine line. Detroit was killing them.
Yes.
He took it upon himself to become stronger so he could take the hits for that 82 game season and be ready for the playoffs. And it worked for him.
Yep.
But it's not working for everybody else, though.
Yep.
So you got to watch it. I do want to talk about some football. We have limited time. I want to talk about, let's talk about those Cowboys. Did you see last night? Did anybody watch last night? I'm starting to feel like
there were a season,
come on now.
if there were a season that encapsulated just how embarrassing a franchise can be for what it's worth, for the enigma that it is, for the aura that surrounds it and everything else, it is the Dallas Cowgirls of 2024. I am sorry, but the media needs to stop covering them. That is my begging wish in society is, if something fails, stop covering it in sports.
Well, and I think to add to that, what they need to do is take this aura that Jones has.
Yes. They need to start over.
They need to remove it. And I'm going to say this, and I've heard it from other people on TV. I'm going to say it too. Your kids, please, you see what's going on. He's being interviewed a lot. And I'm telling you, every time I see him talk or hear him talk or see an interview with him in it, he says some things that don't make sense. Yes. He's losing it. And someone needs to step in and say, hey, Jerry's not available. You know, we're all good. And I think that that's going to help him. And I know it's going to help the team.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, he's digging the biggest grave you've ever seen in Cowboys history right now, as far as their team, their brand, their culture, everything around it right now. He's setting up the players and everything else for failure. I mean, you saw it in a very dejected Micah Parsons last night when he walked off the field. I don't know if you caught that little moment. Like,
oh, did you see when he was on the sideline going like this?
Well, that was even worse. Yeah.
This happened. This is just incredible. Yeah. I think that he shouldn't be showing all of that emotion on the sideline, because he knows darn well that the camera's on him all the time.
Yeah, big problem for him too. Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I get that he should be dejected. But if you saw the guy sitting next to him didn't want any parts of that.
Exactly.
And he saw the same thing, and he was just as dejected.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that locker room has just got to be horrible right now. Like, it's got to be a horrible place to be in right now, just because of just all of that going on. It's not fun for players. I don't see how people would want to go play for the Cowboys in the offseason. And that's the other thing. Okay, this season's over. We already know that. Jerry knows it, everything else. You've got to start thinking about 2025. You have now created a facade, if you will, of a place that nobody wants to go to because it's an embarrassment.
You know what? It doesn't even matter, Promit. You know why?
It doesn't. That's true.
Our names are on here. We usually don't say each other's names. It's because when they get into next season, like 70% of their cap space is taken up by like two guys.
Yeah, it's gone.
So, and they haven't even taken care of Parsons yet.
Nope.
So who are they going to be playing with? I think you and I might get a call. Would be some.
Well, here's a better question for you. So, with as low performing, as I like to say comparatively, as Micah Parsons has been this year, would you, if you were the owner of the Cowboys and in charge of their GM, want to pay Micah Parsons top dollar next year, given what you've seen now in terms of not just, I think, what his performance was, but I think his effort more than anything. I think it's his effort what's his problem. I think the guy's still a top flight defender, but I don't think he's playing up to potential because he's just playing so dejected, honestly.
Well, I would agree with that, but I think my issue with Parsons isn't necessarily his play. I think all players do that. If you look at what Cleveland's done, Myles Garrett looked great towards the beginning of the season. How's he looking in some of these games lately? Yep. So I think that players, it's just like anything. You play on a team and you're giving it your all and you're seeing us lose. That's the beauty and the beast of team sports, is you can be the best player on the field and you can't stop your team from losing. But what you can do is be a leader to show them how to learn how to win and how to deal with losing the right way. If you're going to sit there and you're going to be, constantly with the mic in your face, talking smack about your players, trying to pump up how you're the leader of the team versus acting like a leader, I think that's a problem. And honestly, I'm not sure I would want him in my locker. As great as a player as he can be, I think I might say, you know what, maybe I don't pay you that kind of money, because if we don't end up being good next year, what are you going to do to the morale in our locker room? How are you going to divide our team up? Because either you're pointing at the offense or you're pointing at special teams or you're pointing at even the players on defense, and you're never pointing at yourself.
Yep.
That's the problem with Aaron Rodgers too. And he should be gone too. You haven't heard Aaron Rodgers really take responsibility. He says, yes, I know I should be performing better, but everybody else should be. See, that's not what a leader does.
He's sitting there talking we every week. I'm like, who's we? I'm sorry. Everybody else on this team probably is showing up. It's you.
And you're supposed to own that. And to
Well,
me,
live up to your billing. You're a $70 million quarterback. You're supposed to be leading a team, not just being the passer. You better be the locker room leader for that price tag. Similarly on a defensive tag. Like if Micah Parsons get paid, you got to be a defensive leader for that money.
Hey, have you heard Joe Burrow is having one of the he's having one of the best seasons as a quarterback, and they keep losing. I don't care if they score 40 points, they're losing games.
You know what he almost reminds me of? He reminds me of like a Boomer Esiason-led team. And I hate to make the Bengals comparison, but Boomer had some great seasons, but they never got to the playoffs kind of thing, right? That's what's happening to Joe Burrow because that defense sucks.
But did you hear him once say that?
No, never. The man is a consummate professional. I love that about him. Yes.
And that's what you need in a leader.
Yes.
Parsons does not portray that in my mind.
No.
Aaron Rodgers definitely doesn't. I've never liked him. He's so arrogant, right. And he doesn't take the blame. And that's what leaders do. They take the pressure off of everyone else, even when they're underperforming, and they put it on their shoulders. Well, but that's not what these guys are doing.
Well, and again, I hate to be the media basher here, but I mean, again, I hate the fact that the media, over a number of years and everywhere that it happens, they go and give the crown to someone before they've earned it. And it happens everywhere. And I feel that happened in Green Bay. You had Brett Favre. You already chose the prince, Aaron Rodgers, when he came in. And you already anointed him to be the next best thing to slice bread. And yeah, he ended up being pretty good. I'll give it credit. I'm an outsider. I'm not a Chicago Bears fan. I'm an outsider. And I'll say that yeah, Aaron Rodgers had some great seasons in Green Bay, and he did what he did with the thing, and he got Super Bowl. I don't think he brought the Super Bowl to the town. I thought other players on the team brought the Super Bowl to the town when they did. But at the end of the day, somebody gave him a crown, and he decided to just run with it as the king, and now he thinks he's holier than thou. And that's the problem. Yes.
That's the problem. And that's another reason why people really like Peyton Manning.
Yes, sir.
Peyton Manning, as was heralded as the smartest QB ever and blah, 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 and all these things. But he loves having that little homeboy goofiness about him. He seems to be very humble. He doesn't hype himself up. He doesn't walk around like he's the smartest person in any room that he's in. I love that about him, and that's why he's able to parlay what he's done in football into what he's doing now in commentating and commercials and everything else.
And see, that's where I take it even back further to say that it's about the people that surround these folks that sets the precedent for how their careers are going to be. Yes, we already know they're gifted, talented, and everything else.
Sure. That's why they're where they are.
Peyton, like you just said, the reason I think he is the persona that he is because of his father. He knew how that all stuff worked. You take the opposite of that, and the opposite example I hate to throw in there is Cam Newton. Guy, physically gifted as hell, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Coming out of college, arguably one of the best NFL seasons ever in 2015, 2016, whatever the hell it was. But he didn't have proper influences around him, and I think his ego got into his way, and he couldn't sustain a career over, for the life of me. You've had that happen over a number of different people in the NFL and NBA. That's the reason I say, like, whoever's around them, it could be their fathers, it could be their mothers, whoever is around them ends up dictating how they are throughout the course of time, unfortunately. Similarly, LeBron, he had the perfect sphere of guys around him, in my opinion. Like him and those boys, they knew how to do shit.
and probably the best ever at having an entourage that actually didn't bring you down, but lifted you up. Yes. And I give LeBron all the credit, and all the guys that he runs with, they learned how to manage those situations appropriately. They didn't let the hood life get to them. They didn't let the noise from around them, as far as being famous and rich, get to them. They were businesslike, and look at what they've built. And look at how one of the things, Jordan had this thing with the media. He was doing some dastardly stuff, but he was protected by the media. LeBron, have you heard a thing about LeBron?
Nope. Never.
By contrast, Morant comes in,
Yosemite Sam over here.
He's got a chance to become the next whatever, because they always label him, like you said, they anoint people before they've actually achieved anything. But he's got the guys walking around with him going, yo, man, you got to show how good you are. Pull that gun out in this club, and it's let them know that you're tough.
I swear that there's a group that probably trailed from all the way from Allen Iverson to Plaxico Burress and now to John Morant. Like those boys.
Plaxico, oops, I shot myself, Burress. Oh, gotta love that guy.
I swear, like, okay, I get where people come from. I get the life they have to come from. I get the people that have to be around them. But again, this goes back to the thing that we said at the beginning of the call. Be better than what you come from, right? Like that's the whole goal in life at some point, right? Like
that was my goal. I lived in the ghetto. I grew up in the hood. Yeah. I used to use words like axe and fintu and all of that stuff. That was part of what I grew up in. But that didn't have to define who I am or who I would be. And I'll still carry some of that because there's some good in what I had from the hood. Absolutely. But it doesn't make me have to walk around trying to prove how tough I am, how black I am. You see how black I am. That's not, you know, the actions I do shouldn't be the thing that is the focus, you know, as far as me being black. I'm black. I don't need to be ghetto and I don't need to show like, that's not what I'm about. I'm just trying to be a man, do something right by the world, by my family, by myself. And I dap up my boys when I see them. Yeah. Do I get a little, you know, ebonic like when we get together? Yeah. But I don't have to carry myself like that every moment, every minute, you know. And I think some people feel like that's how they need to be defined. And it's like you should be defined by your actions. And the fact that you got to this level where there's only 1% of the people, whatever sport you're in, getting to this level, that is defined, at least the work that you put in and the talent that you have. Now, have at it and use that to be able to promote yourself in a good way, promote the people around you in a good way, and hopefully help the world and use your platform to be able to provide insights and support for the things that you believe in and that are good for the society as a whole. That's what my mom taught me, and that's how I live my life.
Yeah, one thing I don't think the media takes good credit of enough, I think, is the fact that now in sports, we've come upon a generation where you have players that are descendants of former players. A lot of them, in fact, in many sports.
Yep.
And people need to recognize the fact that you're seeing the success in these new players, quote unquote, because they're coming from these trees of prior experience, prior everything else. You got the Christian McCaffreys, you got the Pat Mahomes. I mean, I can go on and on. Like there's a list
and many of the stars. Marvin Harrison just got in the league, junior. You know,
so I mean, across the board, like. And you're seeing where, and maybe Marvin Harrison is the best example. You know, Dad kind of did something crazy back in the day. Apparently, we didn't know too much about, I guess. But
but somebody let the secret out.
But now they're at least, you know, they're improving. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I think those disciplines are improving to where these players are starting to understand, hey, I've got to not only be mindful of myself and the image that I portray. You've got to be a leader for a team. And that goes back to what we were talking about where, you know, Diva Aaron Rodgers, Diva Micah Parsons, all these people are playing for themselves in a team sport. It's never going to work and they're never going to win a championship. It never has worked historically, unfortunately.
Nope.
Yep.
Hey, and just to bring us something up, first, I'm going to give a shout out to Dennis Rodman's daughter. Can't remember her first name.
Yes.
Great soccer player. You know, go up. And your dad wasn't around for you, so even more kudos to you.
Trinity big,
But just to get back to that, did you hear about what happened with the Eagles? Now, the Eagles have one of the second best record in the NFC. They're touted to be the only team that can beat Detroit. They're winning every game. And their receiver is saying, getting pissed off on the sidelines and berating the coaching staff and the quarterback for not getting him the ball. Let's see. What is their record? They're winning because they have Saquon. I should be the MVP, but I won't get it because it's a quarterback award. Barkley, and he's getting mad that they're winning. You're in a team sport. So if you catch 10 passes, but we lose, is that better? Now, I get it. I played team sports. I get the idea that when you're on the field or you're on the court, you feel like the more I have the ball, the more I can help our team win.
Sure.
I get that. But if our team is winning, why are you complaining?
Why are you complaining
outside? Don't complain on the sideline. Complain in the locker room behind closed doors. Complain to the coaches, but don't complain on the sideline. And then when they're in the locker room with a mic in your face, you go, what's wrong with the Eagles? Passing. Okay, so let's pass next game and see how much we lose. Last year they were passing. How did that get them last year?
Now, exactly. And that's a funny thing. On the Eagles, you got two polar opposites. You got the wide receiver going haywire on the sideline. On the other end, when Saquon and the boys, they do their dirty work on the field, they've been playing a hell of a game. And then let's say Saquon gets pulled at the goal line and Gainwell goes in. Saquon's the first one out there.
And congratulating him.
Like, this dog deserves it. Like, he's like, this dude deserves it. Like,
that's because Saquon is a true leader.
True leader. Yes, sir.
And he appreciates winning too, because it came from the Giants.
I
made him
think
do a
for
whole
that
lot
reason
of it.
alone, and I mean, obviously his performance speaks for itself, but I think for that reason alone, the dude should be the MVP this year. I don't care what anybody says. Now, going back to what you said, Joe Burr putting up an ungodly line. I'm saying, like, you know, that dude deserves an MVP, but
losers don't get MVPs.
Exactly. That's the truth.
Except Andre Dawson when he played for the Cubs. That's the only one I can think of that got an MVP award for a losing team, a really woefully losing team.
Right. Well, and to the point of Joe Burrow, he's also got this dude named Jamar Chase. He's just a bad man. Like,
he's a bad man.
That dude throws up $150 a game, and it's like nonchalance. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about the fact that he had 177 yards receiving last night. I'm like, hello.
Well, and it's funny. He's got a great name, though, because everybody who's guarding him does nothing but chase
him. And the cool thing I love about their story is the fact that it starts at LSU, comes into the pros. It's just cool to watch. And I
love that. Him and Jefferson, I love the two, and I love that LSU dynamic. I love all of that stuff.
Yep.
That culture down there, Burrow, I do think that, you know, there's a lot of talk, and I know we haven't talked about the games, and maybe we could do that on our next. Yep. There's a lot of talk about Josh Allen, and I have to say, before this season, I expected Buffalo to fail because they basically gave away all of their weapons. And said, we're going to go the cheap route with some no-namers like Tom Brady used to do, and we're going to expect Josh Allen to perform at that level. He's done it.
I'm sorry, but when you put up a 3-3 game in a losing cause, I mean, my God,
he's done it, and I have to say that he's been better for not having those weapons. He's not making those silly mistakes.
He's not forcing the ball to those guys. That's the thing.
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder if quarterbacks fall into what we're talking about. Philly, you're going to guarantee the next game Jalen Hurts is going to try to throw it to Brown 20 times. But is that going to help your team win? And I feel like Josh had some of that, especially with Stephon, I can't keep my mouth shut, Diggs, who wants the ball every goddamn play. So now you feel like you have to throw to that person. But then you got Gabe on the other side going, well, you're not throwing me the ball. Now all of a sudden you got turmoil because they're not satisfied that they're getting enough, touches. And as a quarterback, what do you do?
Nope,
tuck it and run, Josh. That's what you do. Tuck it and run.
And not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the matchup this week. So Chiefs and the Texans. So the Chiefs are playing down a corner again. They just picked up another one off of retirement, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday or something of the sort. And the Houston Texans can still throw. If we know, even if they're having a kind of a shaky season, they still got some of the best receiving core out there. So I'm kind of curious to see that matchup as we go. And going back to the whole wide receiver thing with Stephon Diggs, okay, Diggs, you've left now two teams. You left the Vikings, you left the Bills. Now you're going to the Texans. You got injured. Fine, you don't get a chance to prove yourself this year. What's going through his head is, hey, okay, Josh is doing his thing. Great. I guess I didn't get along with him. Shows up in Houston. Honestly, he's going to be a second fiddle in Houston, in my opinion. I think you've got too much young talent sitting there between Nico Collins and the rest of that dude.
Yeah.
Nico and Tank, that's the future. Yeah.
I thought that when he went over there, but he actually was making a difference and was inserted in the offense until he got injured. I'm not sure they'll pick up his option going forward if there is.
I don't think so either. I think he's played himself out of a contract at this point, or at least a future contract.
Yeah.
Because I think he's only there on a 1-year deal this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and he was a different guy. I think he was getting humbled by the experience.
Yeah.
I just don't know. At what point do you look at this and go, okay, fine, I could have this guy on my team. Now they won't have to pay him $20 million. They'll pay him $3 million.
Let's go back to the Tyreek Hill situation with the Chiefs. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
You had a guy that was turning into a little bit of a diva and all that. And he wanted his money, and deservedly so. The guy's a freak. Don't get me wrong.
Yes, he is.
But we see that he's down in Miami. He's got his own personal issues. He's got like 10 kids with 12 moms or whatever the hell he's got going on over there.
Sean Kemp's cousin.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You make Sean Kemp look tame, man. He's Antonio Cromartie status. I think Cromartie was 13.
Cromartie. He's got a football team and a basketball team full of kids, doesn't he?
Yes, sir. 2 starting lineups. But that's what I'm saying. Like, so I think receivers have to come to the realization they're only as good as they are as team players. And this goes back to the Jerry Rice example. You never heard Jerry Rice talk up.
Never.
Class
act. Yep. I hated the San Francisco 49ers. Never was really a fan of Jerry Rice and Joe Montana until Montana was on the Chiefs. Yes. But you can't deny the fact that this guy was a class act. He went and got on the field, did his work. You never heard anything about him. Plus, didn't his wife, he was dealing with, I thought his wife had some serious medical issues.
Yeah, I think so too. Yep.
And this guy was a leader, a professional, good word. And this is what's lacking in the league nowadays. You don't have enough of those guys. You just don't.
Well, and certain positions are meant to play certain, like I said, the whole receiver thing. When in history have you seen a diva receiver being able to lead a team to a champion? It doesn't work that way. The receiver has to work in conjunction with the quarterback. Doesn't matter who you are. So you've got to be on the same page. You've got to be humble as a receiver, I think, to be successful in this league. And similarly with running backs, you're going to get the occasional guys that are team leaders, the Jerome Bettises of the world. Okay, that's what I'm talking.
Yeah, you can have that.
Walter Payton's and everything, that was historic. But in the new world,
Payton classic example of that.
Yeah, but in the new world, where it comes to when it comes to the running backs, I think it's a different situation.
Yeah, I think I just think the day. I think you had people who were more leaders back in the day, the man's man, but knew how to communicate. I think today, because of all the hype, because of the you got so many people seeking that, and once they are, given that acclaim and getting the highlight, if they become, their ego becomes too much for them. I think a perfect example is why is his name skipping me? One-handed catch from the Giants, who was going to be the next best ever. But then he got caught up in his own hype. Then he became the worst teammate ever. And now he's playing like fourth string on the Dolphins receiving corps?
Right. It's true.
So you're right. I think as you look throughout history, there aren't many diva wide receivers that have accomplished anything big. Heck, take any Dallas receiver besides Michael Irvin.
Yep, that's true. There you go. Well, and Michael Irvin, I don't think he was like a super diva back then either, if you think about it. I think he knew his role too, because you had Emmitt Smith, you had Troy Aikman, you had Jay Novacek, you had the boys, basically.
You had Deion Sanders.
And you had Deion. So, I mean, and Leon Letton. I mean, the list goes on, right? Now, speaking of Leon Letton, so yesterday's oopsie on the punt.
That was so Leon Lettish.
So where does that rank in Cowboys lore?
Right behind Leon Lettish. That was like the biggest gaffe ever.
Where'd this guy come from?
Yeah, matter of fact, no, but he's got two. He's got the snow one.
No.
And then he's got the oops, Don Beebe ran me down and knocked the ball out of my hands at the goal line.
Yep.
So he's got the worst. But this, see, and here, this is another thing that I guess I just need to understand, and I don't.
Yeah.
You have various coaches throughout the coaching staff. When you're a running back, playing with running backs coach. You also have the offensive coordinator, and then you have the head coach. When you're doing special teams, defense, you have these layers of coaches, right?
Yep. Special
teams. Most of the special teamers are like second string, third string players on defense, whatever that position may be. You're going to tell me you couldn't remember that if a kick is blocked, that you shouldn't touch it?
Yeah,
what did he think he was going to do? He was going to catch it out of midair and then run it back for a touchdown, like the one guy did when they got lucky when they had the onside kick, and instead of him just doing what he's supposed to do, which is catch the ball, secure it, fall to the ground, he would have scored a touchdown, which actually gave the team a chance to be able to come back.
Valid.
This is the lack of discipline that these players have, that it's killing
Yep.
the Cowboys and other teams.
What else? Yeah.
And I just don't understand it. Like that guy, this is just me. Maybe it's emotional because it's the next day. I would have fired his ass. Like, look, you have one job to do, and that's just to know these few things. And you screwed it up to where basically you lost us the game. Not saying Dallas would have been able to go on more, but they would have been at like midfield with the ball. And at worst, unless they turn it over, most likely going to be going to overtime because it was a tie game at the time, right?
Well, so the other funny part to the end, I was watching the Manning cast, and they had Chris Collinsworth, who I can't stand for the most part, but they've had him on. And the part of the Manning cast is whenever the teams get in the red zone, they ask whoever the guest commentator is to make a prediction on how they're going to score. First, Chris Collinsworth, he says, you know what? Joe Burrow's going to score a touchdown to Jamar Chase. Calls it. And then walks out of the stadium. It was a nice little scene for the Manning cast and all that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I was sitting there listening to it. I think Joe Burrow was on the 40 at that point. They had just finished a running play. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? He's going to be right about this because that's exactly how they're going to close out this game. Like you can write the script because this is the Dallas Cowboys.
You could. And again, losing breeds losing.
Yes.
And teams learn how to lose. Ask the Bears. The Bears have lost every potential way you could lose this year, whether it's block kicks, whether it's no timeouts, whether it's the Hail Mary 65 yards. They've lost every way, and Dallas is doing the same thing.
I'm going to circle back to exactly what you said in week one. And you said this about fellow friends and everybody else in the Chicagoland area who were like, oh, it's going to be the Caleb Williams hero season, yada, yada, yada. Well, guess what? We're in week 14, and your team still is in the same place it was for the last 20 years.
I just remember that. I had some guys I used to play with. We have this email or text string going, and as soon as they got Caleb, I didn't want them. Honestly, I wish they would have kept Fields, fired the coach.
Oh, yeah.
And gone that route. Because they took that first round pick, they gave Fields away for nothing.
This goes back to the vicious cycle that we talked about, I forget, a couple of weeks ago.
That's it.
All you're doing is just going back to what I call the 2-3 cycle. And I'm going to name it, right? I'm going to call it where we bring in a quarterback. We don't bring in the coach at the same time. We bring in a coach from 2 years ago who doesn't know shit. And then guess what? We're going to fire that coach as this quarterback is still here.
Off cycle.
Yeah, off cycle. Then we're going to take this quarterback and go, okay, we're just going to abandon him and go to the next one. And the coach is still the shitty one.
But they don't learn from their mistakes. That's Chicago. That's the Chicago ownership across all sports. That's not just football.
What's the phrase? You can't run from your culture? Well, guess what?
But that's what you see around the league. Cleveland's gotten into that funk too. I thought Jameis coming in behind Deshaun was going to do something. Yeah. He can't shake the fact that, he's a gunslinger, but God's dog.
He still can't shake the fact that he's a 50-50 player at the end of the day.
And that's it. I'm going to throw half of my passes to my players. I'm going to throw the other half to the other team.
But my completion rate will be 100%.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, when he played, he wasn't great, but he had his great moments. But you never saw him throw like 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, or and that's what Jameis brings. And what happens is it brings that losing culture to the team, and before you know it, they're doing stupid things. The defense, as you mentioned with Parsons, I don't feel like Garrett's giving 100%, like he was. And then then the ball starts rolling, and before you know it, you can't get rid of that idea of losing. And even when you have a chance to win, you feel like you're going to lose, and you end up losing.
Yeah, no, it's a team sport. People forget it. People forget that basketball, football, these are all team sports. One player can cripple an entire franchise. It can't make an entire franchise, but it can cripple an entire franchise.
Cripple it. Yep.
Yeah. So that's the sad truth, or a coach in this case. And I think this is going to be a season the end of the season will be interesting because, like you said, the Bears are in this vicious cycle. They got to figure out. I'm pretty sure they're going to fire Eberflus. Maybe I'm wrong, or whatever the hell they're doing, all that stuff. They'll figure that out.
Already been fired.
Him, but I mean, they're going to restart the cycle. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, Brown named Timmy Brown or whatever.
Versus the Cowboys, on the other hand, dare I say they do a double firing. Maybe they get rid of the coach. Maybe they get rid of even Dak Prescott's, if somebody's willing to buy the contract, first of all, which I don't think they will. I mean, unless it's something stupid like the Carolina Panthers, which apparently buy everything for free.
The Carolina Panthers, actually, as woeful as they were, and the fact that they had given up on Bryce earlier in the season, they look halfway decent now.
But I think
halfway decent.
Well, I think it had to do with the fact that I think they changed the culture a little bit. So, new coach, younger guy, Bryce Young finally given another opportunity to not work under pressure, I think was a key piece, because you had set that guy up for failure since day one, obviously. It's going to be a telling offseason in the NFL, I think, to see how these teams finally realize how positive culture works in an organization. Yes, for years, everybody thought the Patriot model was the way to go. I'm sorry, but that's now old. Now you've got different teams like the Bills, the Bengals, the Chiefs. I mean, I can name off a litany of them. And of course, historically, the Steelers and Ravens. I can't even leave them out. But people have got to realize you've got to bring in a package trio either of players and coaches into a single season and then let them develop for 4 years. I think you and I said this before. Give everybody a 4-year contract. Everybody, guaranteed.
You're going to have some failure, but you can't just all of a sudden cut somebody off because you never give them a chance to be successful. And you don't have the continuity or cohesion necessary for development.
Yep. 4-year contracts at minimum, and let things thrive for once. That's the only way you can build a positive culture. Like, I hate when GMs think they've got to just like spin the wheel and got to hit magic in round 1 or whatever. It doesn't work that way.
No,
never.
But that's the thing, and we're such a instant gratification, society now, that we don't give things enough time to grow. It takes a bonsai tree. It takes anything time to grow. You just shouldn't put the seed in the dirt and then expect tomorrow you have a plant or a flower or something.
I think we mentioned this with a friend of ours who's a Philadelphia sports fan. So in 2020, if you think about it, Philadelphia sports invested a ton into all of their respective teams. The Phillies went and got Bryce Harper. The Eagles threw money at Jalen Hurts and that whole crew and the entire Eagles organization. Their basketball team is still on trust the process part 55, whatever you want to call it. But either way, in 2020, if you were a fan living in the city of Philadelphia, you were thinking, we're going to win some championships across the board and all this stuff. Even the Philadelphia Flyers, for that matter. We'll even throw
the Flyers actually were good for a minute there.
Yeah, but guess what? In all 4 of those situations, you've now put so much pressure on each of those organizations and set up the wrong way, in my opinion, that now you're probably not going to see any championships during that entire duration, unfortunately.
Well, and you see that.
Eagles, dare I say the Eagles, if they don't get to the Super Bowl this year, I think they blow things up again for no reason, even though I think they've got the right pieces.
That's success. That's sustained success, and yet that's not good enough because you didn't win the championship.
Right. Like they already started calling for Sirianni's head at the beginning of the year, thinking he was some psycho delusional guy. Now they're like, he's doing great. Everybody's happy, and of course, other than AJ Brown.
Let him lose a game. Let him lose another game, and it'll be right back to it. And that's the problem with the media and fandom and how it's portrayed on the TV stations, because everybody's talking the negative. Everybody's looking for the negative. Everybody's looking for something, some chink in someone's armor to say they are not worthy. They're doing it with the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 2-time champion going for a 3-peat. Now, granted, they're winning games by luck in some cases, by whatever. They're not blowing teams out. But already they're saying, are the Chiefs done? And do they need? And it's like, are you kidding me? They've won the last 2 championships. They're 11-1 or 12-1. Come on, man.
I love I wouldn't call them dumb questions because they're fair. I mean, they're asking these questions to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, like, hey, you guys are winning by close games. Hey, Travis, you haven't seen the end zone since last year. Well, shit like that. I'm like, does it matter? You're winning as a team. I don't hear any complaints from any of those players.
Well, I'm complaining as a fantasy owner.
I'm complaining as a fan.
But
until you see a red zone TD, I'm not going to be happy.
You see the difference? Do you see the difference? You're talking championship caliber team and professionalism. Same situation in Philadelphia, and you hear the wide receiver complaining.
Yep.
That's the difference, and that's why it's important. Going way back to where we started this. That's why I wouldn't have Micah Parsons in my locker room, because he's the guy who's going to divide things and complain about things when you lose, and he's setting the wrong kind of tone and not being the leader that people can grab onto and ascend. It's the kind of leader that pushes people down.
Well, I'll put it back on the same defensive onus. Did you ever see any member of the Watt family complaining in any situation they've ever been? TJ, JJ,
never. They weren't winning championships.
Nope. And look where TJ is now. You know what? I'm afraid of the Steelers on Christmas. I'm going to say that much. my Chiefs got to go to a cold Pittsburgh stadium on Christmas night. Well, guess what? I think that's going to be a loss. I hate to say, and we may lose the home field advantage because of that. Unfortunately,
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
I think that. What is this? Okay, yeah, I do think that. I actually wouldn't even mind if the Chiefs lost.
I wouldn't mind if they lost it. Honestly,
I think that would be sort of good for them because you get into this. We're always going to pull things out, and I think you start playing down to the moment or the competition instead of rising up. They have to get rid of these slow starts. They're not going to beat any team in the cold or anywhere else with these slow starts. The defense has been great. It's stopped the run. It's holding teams to field goals and not giving up touchdowns.
Well, the defense is the MVP this year. There's no question.
By far. But they also give up big plays here and there.
We're bend don't break, and that's
one of those teams that utilizes the long pass very well. I have a problem with how we are playing. It'd be different if we had a lead and teams are passing against us, because then you're sort of prepared for that. But if it's a close battle, and all of a sudden we're giving up
one long bomb kills you, and that's where a guy like Josh Allen, a guy like Russell Wilson, they will thrive in those situations. I agree. Yep.
And I think the Chiefs need to just be mindful of that and figure out a way to work through this. I think having Pacheco back is going to help.
I would love us to transition in the next 2 to 3 weeks to a literal ground and pound team between Hunt and Pacheco, and then open it up for Kelsey, open it up for Hopkins, open it up for Worthy, whoever you want, basically, where those guys are the second options, let's say, or the third or fourth.
I think so. And not just because of having a nice balance, and all of a sudden now play action works because they fear the run. I think it helps because it's easier to block in a running stance than a passing stance. So I think that they need to do that because their tackles suck. Mahomes is running for his life. Every time he says hike, it looks like Caleb Williams.
It does.
He looks,
Well, it also doesn't help. I mean, we had this was the first game with the new left tackle again, which is fine because he's a veteran left tackle. So I think DJ Humphries will come around, and I think he'll be okay for us, better than what we've been. Let's put it this way at the beginning of the year. So I think that'll help. Question is, can we make sure that our front line stays healthy? So that'll be one. Protect Mahomes, get him some time. I think the X factor, and I'm going to go out on a wild limb and make the case here, is Noah Gray. I think we are.
He's been the factor. He's been the receiver that Mahomes is counting on.
Nobody thinks about him on the field. When you've got a Kelsey, Hopkins, Hunt, everybody else on the field, who's this 83 guy?
Right. Like to see what they do. Yeah, we didn't get a chance to go over the games.
No.
I don't know.
You know what? We'll come back to that later this week. We'll do some predictions and where we stand on the playoffs and stuff like that because, now we're getting into the meat and the bones of the season where it's divisional matchups, nasty matchups at that. You're going to get a Ravens-Steelers matchup and everything else in between.
And playoff implications and seeding are at on the line right now. As teams,
this weekend, the battle for Pennsylvania, I think it'll be the game of the week. There's no question there. Eagles-Steelers. That's going to be a great game.
It should be the game of the week. We'll see what happens. But that definitely should be a really good game, and it could be high scoring. As good as the Steelers' defense is, it actually could be a high scoring game. One thing to send us off, who is that? Soto? Just signed a contract, 15 years for, I thought it was like over $700 million.
So the interesting possible. So we'll get to two other topics later this week. So one, baseball, and I'll touch on that here in a second. And then, of course, college football playoffs we'll touch on, I think.
College football playoffs. I want to talk about that too. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Soto too, but I can't even believe it. New York Mets are going to be like the New York Yankees. Aren't they still paying Bobby Bonilla? So
they are 2035.
But that's what's going to happen with Soto.
Just think about the dynamic in baseball right now. You had a guy, obviously, I think one of the obviously great players at his age. He's only 25 years old, and he's unbelievable, to say the least. He got offered two of the very same contracts from two of the biggest teams. He got a $760 million contract for 15 years to play for either the Mets or the Yankees. And the dude chose the Mets over the Yankees. Now, what does that say? I mean, there's a couple different thoughts there, right? Now, the interesting thing with the Mets contract is apparently there are some escalators built in that could get him over the 800 threshold. Great. Okay, so it's a little bit more. Somehow, And I think this has to do with some tax rules and stuff like that. He somehow saves $8 million in taxes with the Mets deal versus the Yankees deal. Whatever,
That's smarter.
Here's the real question. You've got a proven history with the Yankees. I mean, everybody knows what the Yankees are. Yes, they haven't won a title in God knows how long, don't get me wrong, but neither have the Mets.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is the dude chose the Mets over the Yankees.
You know why, right?
Well, there's a couple reasons, I think, But I mean, go ahead.
My thought is this. He's on the Yankees.
Yep.
You got Stanton. You got
you got a whole lot, yeah.
You got him. He goes to the Mets. He doesn't have that.
He's the poster child.
Alone. And it's funny because I heard something on the TV about it earlier this morning, and they said, well, now they don't have Superman and Batman. And they were showing Judge's stats while Soto was on the team.
True.
So he doesn't have that luxury now.
Protection. Yeah, protection.
I think that Soto wanted to be Superman and be the alpha dog. And how is he going to be the alpha dog with those three there? The other two have been alpha dogs in Yankees with Judge, Giancarlo with the Marlins, and then coming over to.
And you got Garrett Cole, and you've got all these different personalities and everything.
Yep.
You're not going to get the individual notoriety. Don't get me wrong. Now, I'm going to say it more selfishly. I think the dude wanted to grow facial hair, and that's why he went to the Mets.
I don't know, but he can make the Mets a winner. The Mets came from nowhere to make the playoffs.
The Mets have the right ownership in place. I mean, Cohen's willing to spend the money, as you can plainly see, and he's got Pete Alonso, and he's got a great lineup. He's got everything else going right for the Mets. I'd love to see a title in Queens. I'm not going to be wrong. I was born there, but can they overcome the stigma of the Yankees? That's going to be the real question. I think they've got the ability to. Can they win that city?
I think they can. No different than the Sox winning that one championship with some no-namers in a city that was predominantly Cubs.
Yeah, I mean, it was Mark Burley, and honestly, who's the crazy coach?
Ozzie Guillen.
Ozzie
Guillen. Yeah. Love it when they said it like that. It's like, no, it's Guillen. No, it's Guillen. We'll see. I think the hardest thing for the Mets is
they got to get some pitching.
Yeah, but it's overcoming being the Mets.
Well, and a tough division.
The Yankees.
I call it a tough division. So, okay, obviously we're in the AL East. Obviously, it's tough in its own right. But you got this firepower of people like you just mentioned with the Yankees, okay? Now you're going to the NL East. You got the Braves. You got the Phillies.
Yeah.
The Nats. I mean, all those teams are willing to spend.
That's true.
So it's harder to come out, I think. And, of course, now you're going to go out to play the Dodgers,
Well, I wonder this. Like, for instance, Shohei wanted to win.
Yeah.
He went to the Dodgers.
Yep.
From the lowly Angels.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that Soto cares about winning as much as he cares about being the man and making the money.
It doesn't seem that way. I mean, my running joke yesterday, I forgot who it was with. I was like, so Juan Soto just made the GDP of the Dominican Republic in his contract pretty much. I mean, and maybe that was his prerogative, is to be the richest man on earth, because that's exactly what he's going to be now.
Yeah, but if you really wanted to win, you would have stayed with the Yankees.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's what really stymies me in the whole thing. It's like, okay, if you were a baseball player and you want to win titles, yeah, that's what you would do. You stay with the Yankees, you go with the Dodgers, whatever.
Yeah.
But with the Mets, yeah, he's become the poster child. I mean, him and Pete Alonso on every single billboard. I get that. Maybe that's what he wants. One thing I will say just to our viewers, we're all winners in the game of life. Yep.
Keep playing that game and keep understanding what's important, not just to make you the best you can be, but also what can we do for the environment around us to make it better too? Because we're seeing some things happening in our world and in our society that is of great concern to me and to us, because we see that people are no longer looking at each other as people. Remember, we're one race first. We're a race of human beings. Let's look out for each other and make sure that we're doing what's right so that we as a race can grow. Not how I'm seeing it today. We're so polarized. People are willing to take justice in their own hands. People are willing to lie, cheat, and steal. No one's willing to help and pull each other up. We'd rather push each other down. let's get away from that mentality. That'll make us a better civilized society than what we're seeing today.
Nope, I don't disagree. And on that note, I think it's a great wrap to today's show for sure, because you just encircled pretty much everything we covered from top to bottom. On that note, I would say let's pick back up the rest of the week. College football, huge one. I mean, that's a big topic. NFL, we'll pick up on where we are, and obviously anything else in life that's going short.
Yes, we will. And we
Yep.
wish you all the best.
Yep.
And make sure that you just wake up with a positive attitude and add a positive flavor to the world around you each and every day.
Totally agree. On that note, sending off Brown and Browner. We'll be
Brown
back.
and Browner. All right, peace out.
Catch you later.